Well, while journalists are focused on things like Melania Trump's high heels as she went down to visit Hurricane Harvey, a most grave situation is unfolding in Asia, as you know. North Korea fired a missile high over the Japanese island of Hokkaido, throwing that nation into a panic. South Korea, Japan, America, all saber-rattling, but what can they do? Well, joining us now is an author of the book in 2006 called Nuclear Showdown: North Korea Takes on the World. I want to read to you, just for 1 second before I bring our guest in, an excerpt from the New York Times review of this book in 2006. It was a positive review, but let me just read you the criticism by the New York Times 11 years ago. Here it is. Yet the bigger failure may be that Chang does not consider the available options seriously. He derides the soft, pro-engagement approach favored by China and South Korea, but never fully explains why hopes for a peaceful evolution in the North are so misguided. So 11 years ago, the New York Times was saying, come on, Gordon, it's all going to work out. Let's just keep on those Madeleine Albright-style negotiations. Well, here we are 11 years later, and I think Gordon Chang was proved accurate, and he joins us now via Skype. Great to see you again, Gordon. Thanks for taking the time to be here. The New York Times got it wrong.
Well, they certainly did, because after I wrote the book, we've had years and years of discussions, some of them formal, some of them multilateral context, some bilateral, some secret, but they all seem to have failed. And as we saw last week, both Secretary of State Tillerson and President Trump extended the opportunity to the North Koreans to talk, saying that the United States, in effect, wanted to do so. And essentially, the North Koreans' response was to fire a salvo of 3 missiles on Saturday and another missile on Tuesday. So clearly the North Koreans are not in the mood to have the constructive pathway to dialogue, as our Secretary of State put it last week.
You used the phrase institutionalized brinksmanship. I think that so perfectly sums up Kim Jong-un and even his father, that they know they can keep pushing to see what they can get away with. My amateur assessment, Gordon, is that one of the great strategic problems is that the city of Seoul, Korea, is so close to the border, and there's so many conventional weapons that could hit those civilians, that even if the United States and allies had a decapitation-style strike against Kim Jong-un, even if there was a high-tech solution to part of the problem, just sheer artillery and rockets would cause enormous casualties, and that's why even the bellicose Donald Trump still doesn't act. Is there any way around that massive hostage-taking situation? That's really what I think we have here. 10 million hostages in Seoul, Korea.
Yeah, well, there is a way around it, and that is we put some pressure on China that China does not have to us. So, for instance, President Trump could declare the largest Chinese banks, like Bank of China, to be primary money laundering concerns. Bank of China was named in a 2016 UN report as devising and operating a scheme for cleaning up and hiding North Korea's cash. Well, if we were to unplug, for instance, Bank of China, that would throw into doubt the viability of the Chinese financial institutions. That would certainly affect the Chinese economy. And of course, that would affect the Chinese political system. So President Trump has a lot of high cards to play. He just hasn't played them. Now, what China could do is it could signal to the North Korean regime that it was no longer supporting the weapons programs. And I think that in that instance, some very pragmatic generals, admirals, senior officials would decide that it was not in their interest to support these nuke and missile programs. So we have a lot of things that we can do. It's just that we haven't done them. And I think the story is not so much North Korean belligerence or the Chinese complicity, but it's the failure of American presidents to protect the people from an obvious danger.
Well, and that's what's so curious, because if you just count the number of tweets that Donald Trump tweeted during the campaign by subject matter, I think that China would be the #1 punching bag for him. And he often complains about Chinese economics, about currency manipulation, about tariffs, about one-way trade. So he was very belligerent. And you would think if anyone could or would get tough with China. I mean, Trump's been talking about that literally for decades. So why has Donald Trump, who's a tough guy in terms of personality, who has given fair warning to Americans in the world, why is he being so gentle with China?
Well, I think he has a lot of people around him who he called the globalists, who don't believe that we should impose costs on Beijing. So, for instance, you have the Secretary of Treasury, you have his own son-in-law. A number of individuals don't want to see turbulence in the relationship with the Chinese. Now, I think that that's a mistake because we have tried the cooperative approach for decades on a number of issues, including North Korea, and they just haven't worked. And China is moving in the wrong directions almost across the board right now. So when we look at this, it's nice to have policies that sound good to the ear and we think should work, but we have to look at what's actually occurred. And clearly our policies have been ineffective and in some cases have actually been fueling Chinese arrogance and belligerence. So we need to change course.
I think back to Ronald Reagan's first months as president. And he had a big staring contest with, you might recall, the air traffic controllers who were on an illegal strike. And he said, yes, get back to work or I will fire all of you. And they called his bluff. They said, there's no way you're going to do that. You can't. Well, he did. He put U.S. military air traffic controllers in. He fired them all. Not only did he stare down that union, but I think, in fact, I know after the Cold War was over, that various Soviet insiders said that was the moment where they knew Reagan was different because he wasn't a wobbly-kneed Jimmy Carter. And I think we're at that truth or dare point. Is Donald Trump just going to keep doing the same old thing? And if he won't stand up on China, well, then there's nothing he'll stand up on. I mean, that's such a signature item for him. I think that how he handles this could set the precedent for every other foreign affairs issue, including Iran, which is going down the same path. That's my amateur view. You've been studying this for a long time. If Trump gets tough, will the Chinese blink?
I think that they certainly will because Trump has almost all the high cards in his hand. So, for instance, you look at if we were to take the largest Chinese financial institutions, declare them primary money laundering concerns, deny them access to dollars, they would essentially be out of business everywhere outside of China. And indeed, in China, their businesses would be severely undermined as well. Those are the types of things where they think we're not going to do it because, if, for instance, we were to unplug Bank of China, there could very well be blowback. But I think that that's not an argument against doing it. I think it's an argument for doing it because if we take an action knowing that it's going to cost us as well, the Chinese are going to realize that for the first time since at least 1994, we were serious about North Korea. And I think that we can't expect them to take us seriously. We can't expect them to cooperate with us unless we show them our determination and our intent. And unfortunately, American presidents haven't done that. So, I think Trump certainly has the capability of doing that. He can break precedents. He can do things which people think, are just so much out of the box. But the question is, will he? He hasn't done it yet, and that's going to be the Ronald Reagan moment, because you're absolutely right in your analysis of the way the Soviets looked at Reagan after the air traffic controllers strike.
Gordon, this is very interesting, and I'm so glad we managed to get a few moments from you. You are the expert on this subject. Let's put your book on the screen just one more time. It is available on Amazon. The book was written 11 years ago. It's called Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. Your predictions and prophecies have unfortunately come true, and just looking at that 11-year-old New York Times review scoffing, this won't, negotiation will work, it shows that more of the same pandering will not work. Gordon, it's great to see you. Thanks for taking the time with us today.
Thank you so much, Ezra.
All right, that's Gordon Chang, author of the key book on North Korea. Hey, if you like that, sign up for my show every day. Click on the screen to subscribe.